Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Before we approve the agenda, we have a 3-minute delegation. In case you're interested, if you want to say something to council at the last minute, as long as you alert staff by noon of any day that council is meeting, as a 3-minute delegation. It's just a brief delegation to present an issue to council. And our 3-minute delegation this evening is from Nathan Bruce, a resident of Dewey Road. Nathan, are you here? You just come up to that microphone, Nathan, and I hope it's turned on. If you press the silver button, that should activate it. Yes.
Test.
The floor is yours. Go ahead.
I feel like the appetizer, your worship. Let's do a buffet here. Yes, tonight I just wanted to attend to bring to light some information. My family has been working through a development proposal for a house on our lot of record for 40 years on 414 Dewey Road, just a few kilometers this way on the north side of Verde Lake. And in working through that process, we've seen a few points that we'd like to bring forward to council and staff, and kind of work with that to improve things for ourselves, but also try and improve it for other ratepayers in the municipality. In past, we've brought delegations for that laneway to seek improvement and regular maintenance, and that's happened, and we're quite happy with that, thanks to the roads manager over time. And then more recently with the development proposal and building permit through Cindy and Jason, they've been helpful, but I have some points that I'd like to leave for the record for staff to note and take away, which I've done that. I've provided you all with some paper documentation for that, and we'll go along with the minutes. Within that, I wish to have some clarity with respect to the site plan control that we're required to perform for our application or development, and that's regarding the seasonal nature of our road and how it's maintained, and whether we can apply or our actual, because of our zoning, we're exempt from that. And then further to that, I had an idea that I know our laneway will never ever get full maintenance according to full MMS class 1 to 5. We're not a county road. We're not a high-end township road. We recognize that. But we'd like to share some ideas to retain the maintenance level that we have, and potentially even look forward to improved maintenance over the winter season. And I've included some ideas for that are common among other rural municipalities that kind of take a modern approach to, working with the residents and also accommodating potentially future development and retained use of the property or the roadway by all the abutting landowners, so we can enjoy it throughout the year. So that's my brief synopsis. I have a 3-page paper there that's in front of you. I urge you to have a look over it. I'd answer any questions. Be grateful to hear back. I may come back for the subsequent meeting where I have a few extra minutes and would receive any questions that you have. So take away from that.
Thanks very much, Nathan. Any quick questions for Nathan at this time? We don't have a lot of time to deal with this issue at the moment. This is just kind of a heads up. Move receipt. Do I have a seconder for that? Sherry, any further discussion? That's carried. How would you like to deal with this, Jason? Do you need direction from council for a report or a further and more elaborate discussion at some point? What would your preference be?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve Wise. I think the direction, in my opinion, would be that we receive the delegation as well as the written submission from Mr. Bruce. We take that back, meet with Mr. Bruce as needed, specifically our public works manager, and we'll report back at a future council meeting with the points raised within.
Do you need a motion to that effect, or is that just strictly procedure at this point?
If you can just add on to it.
Yeah, could you include that in your motion then? Doug, is that fine with you, Sherry? Any objection from council? That's fine. Take that as your direction then. Thanks very much, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Worship and Council. Appreciate it.
Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda as printed. Sherry and Rob, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Any conflicts of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? None declared. The minutes of our February 5th, 2024 council meeting. The motion would be that the minutes of the 653rd session of Stone Mills Council from February 5th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Mover. Wenda and Wendy, any discussion on those minutes? Any questions? Wendy, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Our meeting of Committee of the Whole, that was our budget meeting from February 13th. I need to move that the minutes and recommendations from February 13th be adopted as circulated. Doug and Sherry, any discussion on that? We'll be talking about that later in the meeting in any case. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, our 15-minute delegations, we have 3. The first is Wayne Goodyear, groundwater issues and future development. Wayne, you know the drill. Just come up to the table. I'll wait to do receiving and so on until after these delegations, if that's all right with council.
And I'm going to be moving around the room, and I think that's going to be all right to be picked up by your mics. Okay, because not moving around the room unless they're throwing things.
Yeah, I don't
but I
think
wanna be able
it'll.
to-
I don't think it'll pick you up if you're very far from the mic, Wayne.
Okay, I'll walk over and point and come back to the mic.
That sounds fine. You can carry it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's your mic, not mine. Okay, here we go. So I was asked by the community group that's worried about the loss of farmland to have a look at the water situation in this particular area, but more also for the valley in general, because a lot of things I'll say tonight apply to our karst glaciated valleys. They're really tough spots to operate in, and some of them are amazing farm spots. So that opening page shows us a number of things. Those points that you see that look so irregular, those irregular points, I didn't know what they were either. So I went through more than 50 well reports because I have no life. And it turns out that what we're likely seeing there is that you've got a stepped valley. So there are places in the steps down the sides of the valley where water comes out. And those areas are what show as blue. And in places that are all blue, it just means you're getting fed. This recharge area is getting fed from rain and snow, from surface flow, from upgrading, and from water from beneath, okay? Which is why it's so incredible as a farmland. All right, go to the next one. And so the only words you need to look at here is in the middle. It says no confining layer is present. For it to be this remarkable a recharge, a significant recharge, that means that you've got a lot of water going in. It's going through a lot of material that may clean it, clay and silt and overlays of soil and fractured rock. That can clean it so it gets down to where that aquifer is pretty darn clean and flows from there into your villages. That's why it's important here, because this may be the supplier for Camden East and for Newburgh, okay? So the key is not confined. Water can get from the top through to the bottom. Next one. And that's really tough to see. That's why I handed these out, so don't be shy to have a look. All right. What I did with the well checking was determine that in general, our water comes from top to bottom, flows downhill. You can write that down in case you weren't aware of the fact. So, but it does some other things too. And in doing this, I discovered that there's a real water course runs across the County Road number 4. And that water course actually is a stream, and I drove over it tonight, and it's full and flowing. And I thought, where's that coming from? Because it doesn't make any sense. We don't have another full stream in that area. So using the wells, you can deduce where the water is flowing and where it's starting at the top. All that top area is actually recharged. It's not significant because it's going through broken limestone until it finds a spot to run in, okay? But once it arrives in this large reservoir, it's recharged. That reservoir, I guess you could picture it that way, that it's like a reservoir in California, only it's not open water, it's saturated stone media, okay? Still full of water. And therefore, it's a real good source of both water and maybe clean water, depending on how it's been treated. Okay, next one. And so this just shows you the relationship between the various things when you look at them in this form. And you realize now that we've got a recharge zone that lines up almost exactly with your really good quality land. Well, what a surprise. We get really great soils from the glaciers, and we get forests over the top that build up the podzol layer on top of that for thousands of years. And we've got this water coming from beneath. They're being irrigated from beneath. So that's why you've got this incredible farmland. How good is it? It's the best farmland in 1963 soil survey, the best farmland in Lennox and Addington. And that's saying something when you think about Sherman's Point and North and South Fred and those areas. It's the best. Okay, next one. So one of the things that, a little bit higher, maybe, thank you. These are faults that are a part of the limestone, and they may even go down into the granite. And those fault lines define a lot of what we have around here in terms of our river. This long run here, that's why our river runs in that straight line from Joe Lewis's farm on down, because there's a major fault. Get caused by tectonic plates moving, earthquakes, or just the huge ice, which was about a mile thick in this area, 120 tons per square foot. Don't know. But you got a major fault there, and that's a little transverse fault. Those are faults that go off right angles. You got another one at Yarker, and a transverse there, and that's why you have the Hogsback Falls at Yarker. River goes along, goes over the falls, and turns left. When you see that happen in rivers, that's because there's a fault that's moved the rock. Okay? So we're faulted. We're faulted there, we're faulted at Yarker. Okay, next one. Sorry, I'm away from the mic. All right, so my buddy and I, Steve Knowles, who did all these overlays for me, we took that fault line and made it the same scale, and then tried to see if it's going to line up at all. Stay over here. If it's going to line up with what the contours tell us. The contour lines tell you where you're the height of the land, okay? And contour lines that point up one after the other in a pointer like that, that means you have a stream. And it lines up exactly with that stream. So now we know why we have a stream that crosses the highway. It's a fault line. And that means a lot of things have changed. It's possibly deep and been silted in. So you have a surface stream, but you have groundwater down there, usually 25 to 30 meters, and it's following the same pattern. So it looks like we have groundwater movement and surface movement in that little valley. It's kind of crazy when you drive out of here and you're going north. When you drive from Camden East going north, you climb, and then you start to go up, and you go over a height, and then you go down into this little valley, and then you're back up again. And I've always wondered, why such a short, tight valley? Because of the fault. Okay, that's what caused it. Okay, next one. And this is an aerial, and it's neat to see the farmland and to see the greenness of the farmland, and to look not only at the Gallery's property, now Mr. Nyborg's property, but the property below it, and look at the tone of green. And this is incredible farmland. And if you took a marker and went along it, it lines up exactly with what we were looking at, where the blue recharge zone runs, exactly across like that, and turns up here and goes through Tracy's property and Jason's property. Okay, so it is the reason that these fields get the extra jump over fields elsewhere that also have good soil but don't have that kind of irrigation from underneath. Okay, next one. So here's what starts to happen. This is a former environmental protection area, and it's not true anymore. The regulation was removed. The Ford government removed that protection for that because it's a wetland, and in actual fact, long ago, this wetland, probably the one that's here in this area, and as you drive along Robinson Road, you'll see the wetland either side. It probably extended down in here, and there was an attempt to ditch it and put in tiles and things. So now you'll even see trees and stuff along the former attempt. Whether the ditch works or not, I don't know. But you've got groundwater really close to the surface in the top part of the property. That's the first of these steps I talked to you about. Okay, the first one near the surface, it's feeding water. It's right there. Okay, next one, please. So, because I have no life, I'm trying to figure out why that happened. And this is what taught me that you got lots of variations, but the bottom two matter to us in a valley like this, in the valley of the Napanee River. And This one here matters because I think that's what we've got, at least in this area. We've got water coming out of those limestone in steps, and they're not close like this. It's the diagram that squashes them. Those can be hundreds of meters apart, but the water is leaving between the beds. If you get this kind of valley, which we also have in different areas you drive around here, that's a dry valley, where you go through the steps of the highway, goes down step, and you say, oh, there's going to be a stream or something in the bottom, and there's nothing. That's because that type of a valley, the water leaves, it goes back into the line. That's the flashing yellow light area in Yarmouth. You get the very edge has water heading down toward the river, but you go back 150, 200 meters, and the water's flowing south. Okay, I'll mention that in the very last slide again. Okay. So this is me measuring limestone. And it's a simple thing. I used to teach it to my kids when I was teaching grade 7 and 8 geography. And that is that if you measure the thickness of these bedding planes that are still together, and you find they're exactly the same, 17.5 inches both of them. This one's Curl Road North, where it was covered in soil. And this is the south, where it's been exposed to the rain and the sunshine. So that's the same stone, but this one looks like, but it's under the acid effects of the soils. What's the point? They're the same thickness. So what? They used to go right across the valley. So we don't know if they tilted down a bit, okay? That's a syncline, or up a bit, and that's an anticline. It doesn't matter, because the glaciers came along and schmucked them, and they would knock the ceilings in, broke them off, which you can measure the sides, and you can do it all over the place. You can do it at the Fall of New York. Okay? So if we weren't complicated enough where the water's going, now you had the fact that the lid got collapsed. Okay? Next one. And this is what happens when you start trying to pump in a recharge zone. So the top of those two shows the recharge zone. The blue is not water, folks, okay? It's saturated limestone. It's fractured, saturated medium. But they show it in blue or you'd never be able to make sense of it. So that's what it looks like in a recharge zone. Well, why is there low salt in the top picture? Because the recharged water coming off the top is fresh. 5 minutes, thank you. All right. And as soon as you put wells in the second picture down, you begin changing that. You start pulling the low salt water up and the higher salt follows. And then the really high stuff that can ruin and get your well failed is in the bottom. And that's what can happen when you're dealing with a recharge zone. Things move up and down really well. Next. That's a well report. I guess you've all seen well reports. I've seen enough of them to never want to see another one again, but they tell you a great deal, and they're very important in terms of seeing if an area is going to be ready for development or what can be done with an area. They're really important. Next one. We have 3. I have been able to get 3 well reports on the former Galbraith property. And you can see the locations, a dot down at the bottom by that little elbow, and then 2 near the, 3/4 of the way up. What does it show? It shows that the groundwater at the top is very, very close to the surface. Their found water was 10 feet down, and their final water was 7 feet down. So that's an area, and you can see where it is on the total plot. That's an area in which you would be careful because the water is very close to the surface and you're running the risk if you try to dig a foundation, and you're also going to have to case your well really well because the water is very near the top. It's really vulnerable to whatever's falling on the land. If you're using manure or fertilizers or anything else, it's going to get into that water table because it's so shallow, so close. One to the left, the final water was down 30 feet. They found water at 17. What's that mean? It means your groundwater, your water table is sloping down to the west. And the bottom one, your final water is at 41 feet. And it was found at 42. It's sloping toward the village. So like most areas, it's moving in 2 directions. Next one. Okay, and we're taking a look at the dump now because if I follow that stream up, I notice that the stream actually goes through the influence area for our dump. And so this is a 2015 picture, and it shows you that the quarry area, which is a part of the dump attenuation zone in another diagram, the quarry has got small trees, shrubs, soil, and hasn't been used in a very long time, 2015. At some point, it's been excavated because I've been in there and taken measurements on the surface. Okay, so that's 2015. Next one. All right, and so what this is showing us is from the legend, And you've got your sheets, because this will be really nice for you on your page, but folks in the audience can't see this for the hoop. The one that matters a lot is the existing waste footprint. That's the yellow one, okay? And all these blue and white dots, those are monitoring wells. Some of them do both the surface water and the deep water, the groundwater. And some of them, like this with the triangle, they're just doing surface water, all right? And why is this important? Well, if you take a look at where the wells are, and in the 1970s, Doug Davis and I spent evenings monitoring the methane fires by the hour. That's the shape it was in the 70s. And in the 70s, the Ministry of the Environment put forward an effort to close it. And there was a lot of back and forth, and it didn't close, but it was scheduled, not scheduled, that's wrong. Their report indicated the need to shut this place down, and it's still going, 60 years later, okay? And what I'm telling you now is that I'm a little suspicious here when I see this much from this well all the way around to these two, that there's nothing down here. This is part of the oldest dump site, and I'm wondering why there weren't more wells put in there, and maybe something that professionals could recommend, okay? Well, we have a funny issue, and I'll show you on the next one what that is. I'll have to do it in 1 minute. I can do it in 1 minute. Okay, so here we go. What's the problem? Dry, since 2016, maybe from 2014. Dry, October 22nd. Dry, down here. This one here, dry. The next one up, SW2 goes dry from time to time. Okay, we got a problem. I think that this land tilts this way a little bit. Tilts so that there's not just a flow to the southeast, but to the east. Okay, and give you the next one. And that's the dry wells, that's their wells. These are the years, and those are the wells that were dry. And yet, reports keep making that everything's just fine, nothing to worry about. Two key statements. They say that they think that the dangerous stuff is attenuated, but they don't say where. And they think that the surface water readings, and this is important, they are really, and they're good engineers, they're saying they don't think that they're originating in the waste site, in the landfill site. So you ask yourself, well, wait a minute, where are those exceedances coming from? Okay, go ahead. And just, yeah, that's exceedances. These are the rates that you're looking at. If you can move that over a bit, it doesn't matter. If they're marked with exceedances, they're twice or three times what they should be. All the rest are fine. That's the key. All the rest of the really dangerous ones are fine. Go to the next one. And these are all the exceedances on those things right there. Sulfates, hardness, dissolved solids. Real high exceedances, and they aren't sure that they're even coming from our waste disposal site. So either we have the second miracle, the first is the farmland, and the second is the dump, or we need to have this looked at, and I've asked council to get the 1970s report on that dump. It's vital. Give me the next one. That's what a landfill site looks like. It has been a disaster for Richmond, but not getting dramatic, but that's what the plume looks like. We should have a plume out of this dump of ours. Doesn't mean it's going to go very far, doesn't mean it's threatening anything, but we don't have any idea, and the engineers doing the reports, if they could find a plume, they'd show you. And we're not having them, so I honestly don't know what's going on. All right, give me the next one. And this is what happens when you get it wrong. So, this is an excerpt from the Ontario Water Resources, who moved in when we had 30 kids get hepatitis in Yarker in 1964. The surface drainage in the area of the well is from the northeast to the southeast. That is, the surface drainage is from the area of the well towards the septic tank tile bed. Well, that should be okay. However, the slope of the underlying rock in the area is the reverse of the surface slope. The contours and watercourse located would indicate that groundwater flow is from the east to the west. And that's what we have to be careful about when you're doing development or when you're trying to figure out where a well can go, where a septic system in this karst topography. Okay, the slope went one way on the ground, and the limestone is going the other way. That crazy little diagram I showed earlier explains how that can happen. Okay?
Thanks, Wayne.
John.
Yeah, you only went 2 minutes over. That was pretty good.
For me, that's bang on.
Any questions or comments for Wayne at this point? Yeah, it's part of our agenda package for the evening. If you go online and find the meeting for tonight, it's all in there. Yeah. Yeah, this is not an open public meeting, by the way. I'll indulge you, but the only speakers tonight are the ones who are officially on the delegation. So any questions for Wayne or comments at this point? So Wayne, thanks for doing all that work, and it was very interesting. There was some things in there that I hadn't considered before. I'm wondering how you spent a good deal of the first part of your presentation talking about the groundwater recharge zone in the Camden East and in the River Valley area, and then you started talking about the dump site and sort of the lack of indicators in dry wells and so on. How are you connecting the two areas? Do you see a threat to the farmland at Camden East, or what's the connection here that you're trying to draw?
Sure. Connection is that you've got a filtered top to a reservoir, and anything entering from the top just goes. It goes through that top medium to the bottom. So we want to know as much as we can about what's showing up at that recharge zone. What's coming from up gradient into the recharge zone. So we know that it's coming out of steps on the side. Pretty sure that's what's happening. Coming on the surface from the stream, and also coming through rain and snow. And so we want to find out what's in that. And my concern that takes it to the dump is that the stream and the groundwater actually go through the influence area of the dump and lead. If there's anything there, there may be nothing there, but we really need to have somebody take a look and get the 1970 study ordering closure. We got to know what their thinking was, because they don't do that lightly. And that's 1970s, was the Ministry of the Environment actually had really good engineers working for them.
And a budget.
And a budget, absolutely. Yes, they were well respected then. We've lost a lot of respect for science.
Mm-hmm. So you've made that request of staff to.
Yeah, and I am not going to do it, John. I played that game with the Board of Education, and they sent me a bill for $122,000, which I laughed at because it was a bluff to make me go away. And I think you remember those days.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, you guys get it. You guys get it. You either got it in your own records, or you go to MOE and say, look, we got to have this, because we're thinking about developing houses and putting them in here. How are you doing that with the load that's going to increase on your dump? Because your last 2 years are averaging 3,000 bags a year, not 2,200, not 19. If that stays, that level, you got 10 years on your dump, not 15. So we got to get our ducks in a row here in terms of what's the dump doing? Do we need more? I can't tell you that. You got Melrose. Have Melrose take a look at this and review this thing, but get the study that said it had to be closed to see why they were saying it had to be closed.
And what's been done meanwhile to
Yes,
to mitigate whatever they were concerned
that's
about
right.
at that
What
point.
techniques are being used, and how many fill areas? How many times has it moved around? Because, as I say, Doug and I worked in a fascinating setting. It was amazing. Yeah, we were the fire department, and we were watching. Couldn't put it out. You just had to watch it in case it went insane, and we'd sit around and tell lies the whole night.
So there is a certain irony here, and I agree with everything you said. We want to know. We want to make sure, as you say, maybe there's nothing. Most of the I think all of the materials, for want of a better word, that have been found in the groundwater aren't what you call toxic contaminants. They're
right.
elevated levels of iron, sulfur, things like that. So that we aren't seeing heavy metals. We aren't seeing bacterial contamination and so on.
And you're not seeing the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, the phenols,
Right.
the cancer causers.
Carcinogens.
You're not seeing those.
Yeah.
And we're going, it'd be almost more reassuring if you had some minor exceedances in those areas. So are we missing it? Is it completely gone? And where did it go?
Do the wells need to be deeper, or do we need more of them? Do we need them down gradient more?
Yeah.
And those are things that MOE, to a certain extent, the Conservation Authority and so on, have to be recommending in their certificate of approval. So there's some discussions to be had here with the relevant agencies.
Yeah, I was surprised when I did the 17s and the 22s, and that there wasn't a recommendation for wells to the east side, because I'll bet you $20 that there's a component of movement to the east. The floor of the excavated quarry, so I took 100 inch straight edge because I try to be a carpenter sometimes, and put my level on it and then measured what the drop was. And it was 2%, 2% to the east and 2% to the south. And what the engineer said about the flows to the southeast, not the same statement. And if it is going that, and that's on really good, there's a base to that quarry that you could build a 10-story building on. It's incredibly solid stuff, really good bluestone. So it doesn't take the water in and it moves along it. So we got to find out, you know, who knows? I'll be dead and gone, but if it's going east, it's going to the top waters of that creek. And maybe those swamps are just going to eat it, and that's perfect. But somebody got to test and tell us that that's the case.
Okay, thanks, Wayne.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to receive Wayne's delegation? Rob and Krista Lee, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, our next delegation is Stephanie Brahotsky, provincial well legislation, and you've got a PowerPoint presentation as well, I believe.
And I gotta warn you, I'm so sorry. He's an ex-drama teacher. I'm just a math teacher. This is gonna be so boring.
That's the way to warm them up, kid.
Thanks, Wayne. That was a great presentation.
So as long as that red light sign, your mic is active. So the floor
Can
is
you hear me
yours. Go
okay?
ahead.
All right. Got our first one up there. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay. Good evening, councillors and members of staff and public. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you about wells tonight. And thanks to Mr. Goodyear for providing the background to the issues I'll be discussing. The 11 wells on 50 acres of farmland at the corner of Robinson Road and County Road for just north of Camden East. And it's a parcel of prime agricultural land that was owned by Mr. Galbraith until last year. Okay, slide number 2. In 2022, Andrew Wemp made a conditional offer on that land, and he drilled one well that came up very salty. Mr. Wemp withdrew his offer to purchase the land and had the well properly decommissioned, which is abandoning a well, actually. In the summer of 2022, a company, 1652703 Ontario Incorporated, owned by Teo and Emil Nyberg, then contracted Chalk Well Drilling to construct 10 wells on the Galbraith field. These wells were drilled from September 2022 throughout the winter until sometime in March 2023. Later, on May 17th of 2023, the Nyberg's company bought the land. On June the 12th, they submitted an application for consent to sever the land into multiple lots for development. Next slide, please. Okay, skip that one, go to, thanks, Jeff. Okay, there's substantial legislation concerning water protection in Ontario. Much of it was enacted in the wake of the Walkerton tragedy in 2000. Regulation 903 of the Water Resources Act, called the Wells Regulation, governs the licensing of well drilling contractors, the construction and maintenance of the wells, and the recording of well data. It's the go-to document for all of the above. But if you want to find out more about wells and read it in layman's terms, check out this one. That's the one at the bottom, and it's called Water Supply Wells Requirements and Best Practices, and it's put out by the Ontario government. Okay, now you can go back one slide, thanks. For those of you who don't remember Walkerton, it occurred when a poorly constructed well in the municipal water system became contaminated with E. coli bacteria from a cattle farm in the area. 7 people died, and hundreds became ill, and some with permanent damage to their health. Okay, so this takes us to the Galbraith field. Sadly, some things don't change. In some sense, all 4 of the factors that were in play in Walkerton on the Galbraith are in play on the Galbraith-Nyberg land, and they present risks to water supply in Camden East. My concerns fall into 2 areas. The first one is the application process and lack of disclosure or reporting of well information. And the second one is possible groundwater contamination due to violation of regulations governing sealing of wells and abandonment or decommissioning of wells. Let's look at the application and disclosure process first. Okay, before any drilling commences, the contractor has to know the site. The driller has to access information about geology and formations, aquifer types likely present, all the stuff that Wayne just talked about. And that driller should also see a copy of area formation maps and reports at local, municipal, and conservation authorities. Now, that information is readily available and helps the contractor advise the well owner about where to drill. Next slide. This is the significant groundwater recharge area that Wayne talked about. It's shown in red. And the Galbraith land, if you can see there's a star in the center, that's the Galbraith land is situated right in the middle of that. As Wayne said, it's a giant filter for the aquifer that supplies Camden East with water. 3 concerns arise from the location issue. The location of the significant groundwater recharge area was never considered in deciding where to drill the wells. In fact, when I talked to the well driller, he claimed he didn't know of such a thing, and that despite his company having been in business in the area for over 100 years. And yet here it is on the township website, available to all with computer or transportation to the township office. The Nybergs never disclosed the existence of the 10 wells on their application form for consent to sever, even though the application form requires a survey map disclosing any feature, natural or otherwise, specifically mentioning wells that may affect the application, in, of course, the applicant's opinion. Well, 10 wells in an important recharge area, they didn't think that was an important consideration? I believe they did. That's why they left it out. I think if someone poked 10 holes in your coffee filter while you're brewing it, you'd find the effect significant. Yet the application was signed off as complete by the planning staff, but it wasn't complete. Critical information had not been disclosed. The Nybergs further stonewalled at the November 29th Committee of Adjustment meeting. When I questioned them about the wells on the property, Emil Nyberg said he knew nothing about them, not his thing. Teo, initially silent, finally after prodding said he thought there might be 7 wells. Emil agreed the wells were there when they bought the property. True, but that's misleading since they put them there. So he contradicted his earlier statement that he didn't know about the wells. But by law, chalk well drilling would have provided them with 10 reports and/or field notes about the drilling. Why then were they so evasive about the well's existence and origins? My third point, the location and number of these wells in the recharge and aquifer areas were not issues raised by the Stone Mills staff or Committee of Adjustment when it considered the initial and subsequent amended applications. There was no discussion about the wells even when the Nybergs were put on the spot about it at the November 29th meeting. How could staff not know about the wells? At least one party to the application process is culpable. How can a Committee of Adjustment make a well-informed decision when they are not well-informed? Pun intended. The sad reality is that there was no oversight or control of the siting and drilling process, and this is true across the province. The development proposal would never have raised concern had it not been for the vigilant resident who saw the wells being drilled and raised the alarm by submitting an appeal letter to council. Without the several appeal letters from residents, the application to sever would likely have been automatically approved without even being sent to the Committee of Adjustment. Next slide, please. Skip that one. Okay. So this brings me to problems in the structure of the wells. And my topic is well construction and sealing. Every well must be properly sealed. To seal a well incorrectly or not at all is a violation of the well's regulation. It's not just the well itself that must be sealed against a number of risks, but the hole in the ground outside the casing, known as the annular space, must be sealed according to strict protocols. This diagram shows the casing in the center of the hole. That space around it is the annular space, which usually goes all the way down to the bottom of the casing. Next slide, please. Layers of sealing material, often bentonite, concrete, or cement, must go down several meters to the bottom of the well casing. And those are 3 examples. The one on the right is the best practice. The regulations are specific, and circumstances of soil geology and construction dictate how this must be done. If this space is left open, it can become a pathway for the migration of surface water, contaminants, gas, and groundwater, either up or down the length of the casing. A properly sealed well prevents this. In addition, the surface of the soil immediately surrounding the well must be graded away from the well in order to divert runoff. Jeff. Okay, here's two examples provided by the Ministry of Environment literature of how not to seal a well. Both are in violation of the well's regulations regarding sealing. And you can see the space, the annular space around the bottom of that well. That's a test well, by the way, and it's not sealed, it's open. And that opening goes all the way down to the bottom of the well. Next slide, please. Here's another one. And that opening wasn't discovered until they dug out the surface to find out that it hadn't been filled all the way down. Okay, so now you see what an unsealed well looks like. Let's go to the next slide. These are 5 of the wells on the Galbraith-Nyberg field that were drilled at least a year ago. The annular spaces have not been filled and have been open to surface contamination and runoff for a year. This is a serious violation of the wells regulation. There is no visible sealant, and the land surrounding the well does not appear to be graded away from the well hole as required. The careless disregard of required protocols to seal the wells against contamination is apparent. Now let's have a look at the poster over here, okay? This is a blow-up of the survey sketch that Nyberg submitted on their amended application for severance. And you folks over here, you won't see that, it's behind you, so you might want to turn around. You can see Robinson Road at the top, County Road 4 on the right, and the Cataraqui Trail is a curved feature across the bottom. Chalk well drilling registered 3 tagged, that is numbered wells, with the Provincial Wells Registry. And these were probably the well reports that Wayne was talking about. These are the red dots on the poster. So you got 2 at the bottom along the Cataraqui Trail and 1 up in the middle of the field, somewhere up north there. The record provided the GPS coordinates, so these 3 wells are located quite accurately. The records also indicate that these wells are sealed with bentonite to depths of 20, 15, and 9 meters. It's not known whether any inspections were carried out to verify this. 2 other wells, represented by the green dots, are tagged, that means numbered, but they're unregistered because they're not yet considered complete, and that's okay. The blue dot in the upper right-hand corner is the Wemp well that was abandoned, and it was accurately located by Mr. Wemp himself for me. All the other locations on the map are estimates. I don't know exactly where they are. What further work is planned for the green incomplete wells is not known to us. Will they be drilled deeper? Will they be fracked? A process that can be very risky in the sensitive recharge area. Are additional wells to be drilled to provide a water source for each of the 6 lots and retain parcel C to service all the severances as required, meaning more incursions into a complex geology and vulnerable recharge area and aquifer. The owners are not sharing their plans with us, but we do know from annotated sketches submitted to the township that a ZBA is being considered. I don't know what that is for parcel C. Perhaps we can ask the staff or council members here if it means a possible zoning change in the works. This brings us to the most grievous violation of the wells regulation, the improper abandoning of the remaining 5 wells. Let's take a look at those remaining 5 blue dots up on the poster. These are the Nyberg wells that were to be abandoned. And I want to make 3 things clear from the beginning. Abandoning does not mean just walking away from an unusable well. It means decommissioning a well by a prescribed and very involved procedure, which will be outlined shortly. Secondly, it's not the responsibility of the driller to abandon the well. Under Regulation 903, it is the well owner's responsibility to do this and to ensure that it is carried out according to 903. Next slide, please. Okay, skip that. I left it out. Okay, next one. Skip. And yes, here we go. Okay, when to abandon a well. The abandonment has to take place immediately when evidence of salt, sulfur, or any other contaminant is discovered in the water. According to the Chalk Well Drilling Company, 4 of the 5 blue dots indicate wells that came up salty. It isn't clear why the 5th is being abandoned. Perhaps it was dry. You'd have to ask the owners. The abandonment process on the Nyberg wells should have started immediately after the wells tested poorly last winter, but the process was never begun. Abandonment is an involved 9-step process, probably more involved than the original drilling of the well. It requires some special machinery, sometimes cameras and equipment, and is a considerable additional expense for the well owner, which is another possible reason for the failure to disclose the existence of the wells. It is a violation of the wells regulation to improperly abandon a well. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Okay. Here's the sequential procedure that must be done to abandon a well. It's quite involved, and I'm not going to go through all the steps because I don't have the time. It appears that these steps were not followed, as it depends on another, one depends on another in sequence. It's obvious from this table that abandoning was not done. A properly abandoned well has the casing removed as far down as possible, is completely sealed, and is no longer visible on the surface. The record of abandonment was to have been submitted to the director within 30 days of the removal of equipment last winter. There is no record of this because the decommissioning was never done. You're doing great, Jeff. Thanks. So what remains are open holes, subject to surface contamination over the past year. The Galbraith land, now owned by the Nybergs, was farmed throughout the 2023 growing season. Farming was carried out in very close proximity to and around improperly sealed or graded wells. Contaminants most likely have entered the annular spaces. How far did those contaminants move, and did they reach the aquifer? We don't know. This constitutes willful negligence in violation of provincial regulations. Liability falls entirely on the well owners and possibly the landowners who permitted this. The existence of the wells has been downplayed by the owners. These wells are open wounds on lands that for generations have provided a natural filtering system and protective layer for the complex geology of the region and the large aquifer supplying Camden East. 11 wells have pierced that layer of protection, and in doing so, at least 5 have breached layers of salt as well as other contaminants, possibly allowing direct conduits to the aquifer below. Next slide, please. So let's go back to the beginning of my presentation, to Quinte Conservation's take on factors that led to the Walkerton tragedy. They include an improperly constructed well. I've shown you several on the Galbraith-Nyberg land, and though the Walkerton well supplied a large municipally operated water supply system, our municipal supply is the aquifer. Walkerton involved a contaminated water source. The vast groundwater recharge zone north of Camden East has for years provided a natural filtering system for surface water, runoff from roads or nearby farms, including the Galbraith land itself. A nearby livestock operation, streams, ditches, and any open wells. Contaminants of the Walkerton water supply came from a livestock farm, but that farmer was not liable. He had done nothing wrong. The well was the issue. The third problem with Walkerton was inadequate training and education of public utilities staff. We don't have staff, trained or otherwise, to oversee the construction and maintenance of wells. And the fourth problem, and the last one I'll mention, insufficient reporting requirements to the Ministry of the Environment. And in this case, the Fox is in charge of the hen house. Now we know why wells on the Galbraith-Nyberg land were never reported, neither to the township nor to the ministry. Action would have been taken against the well owners. They would incur fines and considerable expense to finally proceed with decommissioning, and their application might be denied or deferred indefinitely. Moiling for gold, they are now also liable for any resulting contamination of the Camden East aquifer. Now I have a summary. So I've come to realize and conclude that Stone Mill staff, Committee of Adjustment, and Council were not adequately informed and therefore lacked the competency to approve the Nyberg consent application. The applicants had held back important required information from the sworn application. The Committee of Adjustment was not aware of omissions in the application. The applicants are in multiple violations of regulations concerning procedures for proper sealing of wells, procedures for abandonment of wells, the grading of wells immediately around the installation, and the reporting of well records. The applicants have allowed the continuation of farming operations around unsealed wells, almost certainly risking contamination of the wells and possibly the aquifer beneath. The applicants have shown a lack of concern for the safety of the local water supply and a complete disregard for laws governing water safety and application procedures. So I have a few recommendations to end with. The application for consent to sever the Robinson Road property should be rejected on the basis of the above omissions and violations and lack of good faith on the part of the applicants. Secondly, the council should inform the ministry, the local health inspector, and any other appropriate governing bodies of these violations which place the Camden East water supply at risk. Thirdly, unregistered wells on the Robinson Road property should be immediately and properly sealed or abandoned under the supervision of a qualified person at the owner's expense. 4, records for all the wells on the Galbraith-Nyberg field must be submitted to the appropriate authorities, including the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. 5, local wells should be tested for possible contamination at various times during the ensuing months. 6, in cases of multiple severances, a site inspection should be performed by an appropriate body to confirm the accuracy of information supplied. And 7, there's a need for oversight of well drilling and abandonment procedures everywhere, and particularly in this county. And the 8th and last one, disclosure on consent applications of locations of relevant features of a subject property should be mandatory and not at the applicant's discretion. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions or comments on Stephanie's presentation? Yes, Christine, go ahead.
Just more a question for Jason, because I'm not as familiar with the application. Thank you for your presentation. Can you just confirm whether or not the application included these additional wells that are contained in this presentation or not?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve Weiss.
Or is that?
The sketch that we're pointing at on the wall was considered by the Committee of Adjustment on the November 29th Committee of Adjustment meeting. The applications for consent were considered and lot addition for lot creation, but wells were a component of conditional approval or provisional approval, if you will. So final approval would have the applicant confirm that well testing is provided to the satisfaction of the township, to the Ministry of Environment and the peer reviewer. So well installation, which is not regulated by the municipality, rather than MEC, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, was not a key consideration at time of those applications that were considered by the Committee of Adjustment.
May I comment on that?
I'll just go around the table first.
Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
was there anyone else on council? Yes, go ahead then.
Okay.
Wenda, sorry, Wenda has a question.
Yeah, Linda.
Just curious, you have some really great pictures here. And I just want to go back to the pictures of the wells that are unsealed annular spaces. How did you get those pictures?
I went over there and took those pictures.
You trespassed?
I did. And if you want me to blow this thing wide open in the newspapers and so on, you'll make me into another Aaron Brockovich.
Okay, just curious.
Right.
You wanted to comment on
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this was not part of this would not necessarily part of the provisional approval. This was supposed to be part of the original submission. You have to acknowledge that the wells are there when you make your original submission, and you actually signed off that the application was complete. So they should have been there. I mean, this wasn't something we were going to go out and discover later. It was there when the application was made and should have been noted.
Yes, go ahead, Wenda.
Just one other question, Stephanie. You had some recommendations. I think there were 8. I didn't. I write fast, but I
I
didn't.
have a copy for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Would you mind sharing?
Yeah,
that with
absolutely.
council?
I'll pass
And
it
I
out.
missed the last one, number 8.
Yeah, we can get copies for every one of those.
Yeah, it's just that I said on consent applications, the locations of relevant features of a subject property should be mandatory and not at the applicant's discretion.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment or question at this point? So thank you for that presentation. It was very thorough. It's always good to be reminded of well safety. I used to teach a workshop called Well Aware that for new landowners that went over all the provisions for drilling a well and abandoning a well. You're quite right, is a legal term to properly abandon a well. And you've raised some points that should be addressed in the case of these specific wells. It does beg the larger question, though, and this is not to throw shade at your presentation at all, but we're dealing with a significant water recharge area, as Wayne elaborated on in his presentation. Poorly constructed wells are not the only route to an aquifer. The soil itself is a route to an aquifer. And in fact, in this Napanee Valley recharge area, we already have an example where improper application of manure and fertilizers have led to contamination of wells in Newburgh with elevated nitrate levels. And that wasn't deliberate on the part of the farmers. They simply didn't realize that this situation was arising. For years, the farm was required to supply drinking water to the homes that were affected. And that situation is starting to resolve itself. We had a zoning application in which a hydrogeological study was done early at a meeting this evening, and no nitrate contamination was revealed in that well, and it's in that general area of Newburgh. So those situations do resolve over time if there's no recontamination. But the irony of the situation here is the original concern we've been presented with, which I completely share, which is the division of farmland and the loss of farmland to development, is also the same farmland that we're concerned about in terms of groundwater contamination. So the irony is, should it be farmed at all? Should there be development on it at all? Should it simply be forest? Because it is so vital a recharge area. These are sort of the larger questions that present themselves to my mind. There's really more than one issue at play here. There's a lot of intersection and complication. So as we study this issue and try to come up with a reasonable approach to development or not on farmland, we also have to think of the water contamination issues that go along, not just with development and with dumps, but with farming itself in sensitive areas. It's a big ball of yarn. So with that, I will ask for.
May I just make
Yes,
one
go
comment?
ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And honestly, with the people we've been talking with on our committee, our representative committee here, is that, that has been a concern too. And I'm not letting any farmers off the hook because they have to go along with best practices. And those are other concerns that have to be addressed. I agree with you. My task here was just to address some particular and very direct concerns at the moment. So, but yes, your point is well taken.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive Stephanie's delegation, Wenda and Crystal Lee? Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
And our final delegation for the evening is from John Neisman, Enterprise Community Charity Events Enhancing Kitchen at Enterprise Hall. John? Yes. Yeah, just come up to the microphone. As long as the red light's on, it's active and the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes if you need it, starting at 7:29.
I have a handout, make it easier to
Sure,
follow along.
pass it around,
I can
yeah.
walk around.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Which one is it you're looking for? Thank you. So my wife and I have started, we call it the Enterprise Community Charity Events. So so far we've had 6 games nights, family games nights. There's been 275 that have attended. So we're getting roughly 45 people per night. It's every second Friday night. We had 3 benefit breakfasts. Total attendance was 413, so we're averaging 137 per breakfast. And then we had a Valentine's chicken dinner. 108 tickets were sold. So we had 796 total attendance for those events, and we raised $5,742, and it all went to charity. So we go down to the breakfast and meals. So the breakdown, December 2nd, we got 137 people that attended, and we donated $1,015 to New Legacy Center. And then January the 20th, we had 147, and the benefit was for the Burke family in Tamworth. It was $1,502 that we donated to them in cash. We just did the J. Dearborn Valentine's dinner, 108 as I mentioned, and we generated $2,400. So $880 was donations and the rest was profit from the meal. And we just gave a check to $825 to the Enterprise School. Past Saturday, 129 attended. So planned for 2024 is we'd like to do 2 games nights per month, so a total of 24, and then 12 breakfasts, so 36 different events at the Enterprise Hall, plus additional meals. So the reason I'm basically here is, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but the kitchen currently in Enterprise, I think it was done 30 or 33 years ago, roughly, somewhere around 30 years ago, I think. It would be nice to upgrade the kitchen. We're nice enough, there's a family in Stone Mills Township that I found a lot of restaurant equipment, a restaurant that went under. So I have a stainless steel hood. It's all commercial. So it has the blower, fire suppression system and so on. There's a very large, it's about a year old cooktop run by propane. So it's roughly $28,000 worth of merchandise. This family, when they heard I had found this deal on it, they had said, you know, what can we do? Is there a way that we can enhance the kitchen? So it was quite a deal. The guy was asking like 12 and change for it, and we got it for less than that. So people were nice enough to give me the cash, and I went and got it, and I have it basically in my garage. Logistically, I'm not sure how we go about doing it or if we can do it. But it'd be really nice. It's a great community outreach program that we're doing. And it seems to be growing pretty much every time we do something. And we're always, all of the proceeds are going to whoever is in need. So we're not retaining part of the money or any part of it. We want to give out as much as we can. That's kind of where I am.
So what are you requiring of council then, John?
How would we go about getting approval to modify or enhance that kitchen? And how soon could something like that be done?
I guess that's a question for staff, at least in terms of the practicalities of the issue, and what our policy is on or plans are for the kitchen and so on. So I'll ask Jason and perhaps other staff to respond to that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve Wise. Mr. Neisman, my first question, just to sort of conclude, if you will, this printout that you've passed around.
Yeah.
$28,000 of commercial kitchen items. If I understand, they're in your garage. You own those. Those would be donated to the municipality to facilitate the upgrade to the existing kitchen. Do I understand
Yes.
that correct?
Yes, 100%.
And then there's 4 items that would be subsequent that would be needed to be purchased to outfit the rest of that kitchen. And those are a propane deep fryer, stainless steel, whatever, hand wash station, and a freezer and a fridge. Is
Correct.
that the idea?
Yes. Sir.
Okay. So with that, Reeve Wise, my recommendation would be that we receive this information. Obviously, our facilities manager's not here this evening, and understand, again, I wouldn't even know what a cost would be for these 4 items at the bottom of the page that we'd be asked for to contribute. But take this information away and see what we are being asked as a staff and report back to council in partnership with Mr. Neisman with his $28,000 in contribution for equipment of what that would look like, and see what the feasibility of it would be on our site. None of that information or none of that background work has been done to support this. This is ultimately getting the ball rolling, if you will, and being a first step. and making it known publicly the successes of your functions. But I don't feel we have any sufficient information in front of us this evening to provide any further recommendation than that for council.
Thanks, Jason. Any, Crystal first and then Doug, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. And it looks like amazing events. I'm happy to make the motion for the report to be generated by staff.
Doug?
I wanted, didn't want to move a motion right now.
That's okay. It can stand. We can just continue to discuss.
And I'm not against the motion, but I believe that we should also share the information or the request with existing users and look for feedback from existing users. Whatever we do, it has to be functional for everybody. So I think existing users need to be notified of the intent. Okay, and then I would second it if that's concluded.
Is that satisfactory, Crystal?
I think that makes a lot of sense and it
Okay.
sounds great.
Anyone else? Wendy?
Could I just make a suggestion to look at the electrical? The suppression system is extremely intense. So, electrical would probably have to be updated.
I think a
as
lot of
well.
things will have to be part of this report, including.
And
that.
I guess I had a question in regards to the income, the 5,742. Does that come to council or is that your group's money that you
No,
have and give out?
you can see in that report, so all that 5742 went to those 4 people. So New Legacy Center received 1,015, Burke Family 1,502, J Dearborn $2,400, and Enterprise School, we just gave them the 825 this morning. So that money has been given to those. So we find out who is in need, and then we basically promote that dinner or that breakfast for that family or for that need or for the school. And then 100% of the proceeds. So we pay the rent, the food, everybody's volunteer, and every penny goes to that event.
Did you have something else, Jason? Yeah, Jason's got something to add at this point.
Thank you, Reeve-Wise. I forgot to mention this in my initial response. The other thing that I want to mention is it's not been lost on staff that we're to prepare terms of reference for our existing halls. And I'm looking at my colleague, Councillor Fenwick, because I know it's important to him. Our CBO and facilities manager has been reminded of that to get onto it before busy building season comes. So I see this as being a consideration of that work as well. So understanding what we have from an asset point of view, what we offer through the rental. Obviously, if this were to be considered, it would significantly change the user's abilities in that hall. So I see that report being parallel with the term of reference that is being worked on currently within our staffing complement.
So it ties in with what we're doing already. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yes, through you, Wise, I just wanted to say thank you very much, sir, for coming forward with this. It's really nice to see something like this. You know, I mean, we all do these little things from day to day to help other people, but when you see it down on paper like that, and I know these 4 places where this money has gone, and that's really, really incredible. You and your group should be, give yourself a good slap on the back and say, well done. Thank you for
thank you.
bringing this forward. And I hope we can come up with something that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Anything else, John?
Who are the existing users that we were referring to? Check with who else are we?
That I can't tell you. Staff can let you know. Fire department.
Lions?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's obviously more benefits. So whenever you're renting that building out, if you've got a commercial type kitchen, it just opens more.
It's more attractive.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So and then you could cater. So if you had a volunteer group, Lions or whoever, they could, do the same thing we're doing. They could cater to that, whatever that is. There was people that were asking about pickleball. So if there was food and refreshments there, you could pickleball, that it could be an easy transformation. And dart, there's a dart league or dart people that were interested too. So having a bar and licensed through the fire department and a canteen type, it'll be a big benefit for that building for sure, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, John.
Thank
We have a motion on the floor to receive this with further direction to staff. Any further discussion? Yes, read it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just read the motion as I interpreted it from the comments. Moved by Councillor Woodcock that the delegation be received and that staff be directed to notify other user groups about the proposal, and further that staff look into feasibility of the proposal by Mr. Neisman and bring a staff report back to council, seconded by Deputy Reeve Davison.
Does that capture your intent?
Yeah.
Satisfied with that, Doug? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, 8.2, Manager of Development Services, Deputy Clerk Sands. We have a zoning bylaw amendment application D06-2022-530, which we dealt with in an earlier meeting this evening. The recommendation is that the report entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application D06-2022 be received for information, and further that bylaw 2024 to be numbered later, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-744 as amended, 530 Main Street, Newburgh, be enacted and passed, and that the Reeve Council be authorized to sign and seal. Did you want to say anything further about this, Jason?
No, thank you, Revise. I have nothing further to add. I can answer any questions as needed.
Any questions from council on this one? Can I get a mover and seconder then, please? Doug and Sherry, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Our next item, 8.2.2, agricultural land policy options. The recommendation is the council receive the report entitled Agricultural Land Policy Options, and further, the council directs staff to make a formal request to the County of Lennox and Addington to undertake a comprehensive review of the prime agricultural land use designation within the county through the completion of a LEAR/or ALES study or equivalent at time of official plan update. And further, the council directs staff to commence a township-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to further regulate residential development on lands with class 1 to 3 soils to solicit public input from the broader community. Can I get a mover and seconder to put that on the floor, please? Wenda and Wendy. Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve Wise. I'll be brief and look to my colleague Nancy Wortman from Arcadis to help us out. And she's got a presentation to overview the staff report for council this evening. My brief intro is this, of course, dates back to essentially the Committee of Adjustment meeting of November 29th, 2023. At that meeting, we had several members of the community that raised concern. Shortly thereafter, on the December 11th, 2023 council meeting, staff was directed to look at implementing a policy regime that would be applicable to class 1, 2, and 3 soils within our community. From that December 11th direction of council, staff have worked very expediently with our colleagues at arm's length at Arcadis, formerly IBI Group, and we're here before you this evening with a recommendation, as you've already noted. The first component, of course, is to make that formal request for a LEAR study or an agricultural land evaluation systems assessment with the County of Lennox and Addington, because that is ultimately the foundation to establishing that policy hierarchy in our jurisdiction, from the province to the county to the municipality. And secondly, we want and recommend that we can do better with what we have in place currently. Beyond what we've got designated as prime ag in our current official plan, we see policy options in expanding our regulations to 1, 2, and 3 soils through the initiation of an official plan amendment and zoning and bylaw amendment that have some draft policies before you this evening. With that, I'll let Nancy overview it and provide any support for questioning as needed. Thank you.
Nancy, do you want to come up? Yeah, just press the silver button there and that'll activate the microphone. And the floor is yours.
Good evening, council and members of the public. Thank you for the introduction, Jason. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Nancy Wortman. I'm a registered professional planner with Arcadis, and we're currently providing interim planning support services to the township while Jason is fulfilling the role as acting CAO. I will just jump right in. I'm used to clicking my own presentation. um, So Jason gave a brief overview, but I understand there's concern from council about the number of severances occurring on lands used for agricultural purposes, and specifically class 1 to 3 lands. I was able to be here at the last council meeting when the other 3 delegations presented, and then Jason had brought me up to speed on some of the severance applications and discussion surrounding that. So as Jason mentioned, council directed staff to conduct a policy review and look at some regulatory options respecting regulation on the development of these lands, which is what I have done, and that is summarized in the report provided to council. So I will, in my presentation, briefly go over everything covered in the report and then can answer questions with Jason at the end. So to briefly summarize, the report touched on the methodology used to determine prime agricultural lands. And you'll note that's in italics. It's a defined term by the province. And by the end of this presentation, you'll be sufficiently sick of hearing the word prime agricultural lands as defined by the province. I'll talk a bit about the interim control bylaw, as I understand there was interest from council in possibly using that as a tool. Then speak to options to update the township's mapping in the official plan, followed by some policy recommendations for council to consider, as well as some potential implications of these recommendations that I would like to run through with you. So the provincial policy statement, which is the overarching policy document that guides planning within the province, requires that prime agricultural areas be protected and designated for long-term use for agriculture. The definition that we refer to, which the lower tier municipality as well as the upper tier municipality, the county, their official plans must also use this definition. So I'll just read it out for everyone's benefit. Prime agricultural areas are defined in the PPS as areas where prime agricultural lands predominate. This includes areas of prime agricultural lands and associated Canada Land Inventory Class 4 through 7 lands, and additional areas where there is a local concentration of farms which exhibit characteristics of ongoing agriculture. The second part of the definition then speaks to how prime agricultural lands are sort of studied and assessed. And it says these areas may be identified by OMAFRA, or the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food, using guidelines developed by the province as amended from time to time. A prime agricultural area may also be identified through an alternative agricultural land evaluation system approved by the province. So I'll just jump right into sort of, again, this defined term that I refer to as prime agricultural areas versus rural areas. So I generalize by saying in southwestern Ontario, where prime agricultural lands predominate, a study may not be required in order to designate the lands as prime ag because it's clearly evident. The example given by OMAFRA is the image on the screen on the left-hand side. Again, sort of in southwestern Ontario, you'd have the hamlet, and then everything beyond that would be considered prime ag because it's just farm upon farm of farm type situation. However, in Eastern Ontario, it is common for municipal official plans to have both prime agricultural areas and rural designations due to a broader mix of agricultural uses, lower capability lands, and non-agricultural uses. So the image on your screen to the right shows what the province would consider rural land uses. And please keep in mind that a rural designated lands also include agricultural uses. They just do not meet this definition of prime agricultural areas provided by the province. So in terms of the methodology that I spoke about in that second part of the definition, where a study is needed to determine or refine prime agricultural designation, there's 2 different types of studies that are recognized by the province. One being an agricultural land evaluation system, or AILS, and the second being a land evaluation and area review, or a LEAR study, as it's commonly referred to. Both methodologies are not standardized. The province provides guidelines, but they are then tailored to the local context. So unfortunately, as a result, they're highly subjective. To briefly summarize The ALE study is largely a desktop exercise looking at aerial mapping and soil conditions, and then subsequently followed by ground truthing through site visits. Whereas the LEAR process is a GIS-based weighted scoring system, which uses mapping and a number of weighted criteria to establish and assign scores to different outside of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, so the sort of Toronto area subject to the growth plan. There is no PPS requirement to undertake a LEAR or an ALE study to address the policy in the provincial policy statement. And I'll circle back to that a little bit later in the presentation, but that's sort of some information that OMAFRA clarified for me. So I think part of what's relevant is between the prime agricultural designation versus the rural designation, what's the difference between those two? If I'm saying rural designation permits agricultural uses and is intended to have agricultural uses. Well, the policy environment for lands designated prime ag is much more restrictive. Generally, permitted development is limited to agricultural uses and those that are deemed compatible with, so sort of your agri-food, your agricultural related uses. Lot creation within prime ag lands is severely limited. You'd only be able to create large agricultural parcels, 40 hectares or greater, or smaller parcels specifically for agricultural related use. Again, that's a defined term by the province. And then for the severance of a residential surplus dwelling in the case where there's farm consolidation. So you're not going to see the severances for just a non-farm residential dwelling in the prime ag area. So then on rural lands, the intention is to accommodate a much wider variety of uses in addition to agricultural uses. And the policies permit development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be supported by rural service levels. So private well and septic in the case of Stone Mills, as there's no municipal services on the water and wastewater front. The creation of new lots for non-agricultural purposes is permitted on rural designated lands, and they're required to comply with the minimum distance separation formula, which relates to livestock facilities in the area. Okay, so that's sort of the summary of the policy environment from a planning perspective that we're working with, and some of the defined terms and the difference between prime ag versus rural. So that sort of overview sets the scene for some of our subsequent discussion. So speaking specifically to using an interim control bylaw as a planning tool to temporarily freeze development, given the immediate concern from council and the public. I understand that there was interest in using it to freeze development on lands classified as 1, 2, 3 soils, with the intention to also apply to new lot creation. So there's a couple issues that we've run into with that. First of all, case law has demonstrated that an interim control bylaw cannot be used to prohibit the subdivision of land. So it could not be used in the interim to prevent lot creation. That being said, the lots could be created, but there would then be no development permitted on them in term, while the 2-year period of an interim control bylaw carried on. Then the second piece that we're faced with is that Section 38 of the Planning Act prohibits an interim control bylaw from being passed for a period of 3 years after an interim control bylaw ceases to be in effect. So if you recall, the township used an interim control bylaw to prohibit the cultivation of cannabis when that was an issue of concern. So based on the timing of when the new, zoning came into effect and the former interim control bylaw ceased to exist, a new interim control bylaw cannot be passed until the 11th of July, 2025. So I know that's a lot of what council can't do, but as Jason mentioned, we do think there's some things that council can do. And the first relates to the mapping of prime agricultural and rural lands within the township official plan. I know council had requested that an OMAFRA representative attend the meeting tonight, and I was able to get in contact with a representative from OMAFRA, but they were not able to attend. But I was able to pick their brain a bit on the situation that we're facing here in the township. And they certainly did encourage that the township look at the mapping, and their preference would be for that to take place at a county-wide level. The county is undertaking a 5-year OP update, and generally in advance of an OP update, if a municipality or if a upper tier municipality was going to be undertaking an agricultural review, they would kind of initiate that process generally a year or two before the 5-year OP update, and then implement it through the 5-year OP update. I mean, the county is in their process already, but I don't think there's any reason why it can't be requested that the counties start to look at that. They have put a temporary pause on the county OP update in light of the province contemplating what they're doing with these potential changes at the proposed 2023 PPS, or I guess it now becomes the 2024 PPS. So there have been a lot of policy changes at the provincial level that then has in turn kind of had the county put a pause on it. I called and spoke with the planner at the county and their consultant that is completing the update. And they did confirm that they have no plans to complete an agricultural review. And in speaking with OMAFRA, I understand that there is no policy tool to require the county to complete the review. But as I mentioned, there's nothing that prevents the township from requesting that the county undertake a county-wide review of prime agricultural lands. And at the end of the day, I know as a lower tier municipality, some of the members of council are then in turn on county council, so can bring that forward as a request for them to consider and present to staff to see if it's a feasible option. In the event that it cannot be completed at a county level, the township could undertake it at a township-wide level. However, time and cost is extensive. I was able to speak with a planner at the town of Mississippi Mills, as they are currently undertaking a LEAR study, which is one of the approved studies. So I was looking to pick their brain to see how their process was going. And again, it was one of those situations where they thought it would take a year, have everything in place. 2 years later, it is not in place. It's currently going to the approval authority, Lanark County. So it would be a similar situation to the township of Stone Mills. But it has just taken a lot longer and cost a lot more money than they anticipated. And they anticipate that it will be subject to appeal because it is highly subjective. So on that front, our recommendation would be that the township request the county complete the review. But I do just want to temper expectations and say that the review is unlikely to see a large extent of lands designated as prime ag as per the PPS definition. Generally, the sort of threshold is 250 hectares of land. It's kind of what they want to see. So there certainly are some areas that could, if you're doing these studies and you're using a set of local criteria, could be designated. But again, just want to sort of temper up expectations that every agricultural parcel you see in the township is not suddenly going to be designated prime ag as a result of this study being completed. So that kind of covers the mapping piece and our options there. And then we can jump over to the policy piece, or things that can be completed within the official plan. And that's where we think through a township initiated OPA or official plan amendment process that we can make some policy changes that can address some of the concerns. It was attached in the report, but there is a draft bylaw. Again, township would have to initiate the public process, but there is a draft bylaw to consider what types of policies could come out of this process. And our general thinking was that we could create a site-specific policy area to apply to those lands identified as class 1 to 3 soils that are not designated prime ag. Lands within this overlay would then be subject to an additional set of policy criteria to include greater direction and lot creation in these areas. I know at a staff level, sometimes, yes, you can give feedback to people when they bring in their application and you're trying to help them reconfigure the lot, but without sort of the policy in place to have the teeth to say, no, you really need to do your lot here, or you need to shrink your lot down to a different size. Without those policies in place, staff are kind of just left to provide guidance. So the policies that we were specifically thinking of would be requirements to limit lot size to be no larger than needed. Excuse me. Consideration for other more suitable locations on the same lot, meaning perhaps someone wants to create a lot kind of down the middle, that there'd be opportunity to guide them. No, we'd support something over on the side only. There could also be a requirement for an agricultural impact assessment to demonstrate compatibility where warranted, because the rural policies speak a lot to compatibility with rural landscape. And then requirements for mitigation measures to be implemented through zoning. So maybe that looks like an increased lot frontage or setback, and those would be implemented through site-specific zoning. At the policy level, because it's in the official plan, it would not impact existing lots of records. So that's sort of the second piece of the puzzle, which I think, yes, I'll flip over to the zoning. So yes, at the policy level, nothing we can really do with existing lots of record, but certainly regarding lot creation, there's some policy options there. But then on the zoning changes front, again, the township would need to initiate a zoning bylaw amendment